Hello, my name is Nollaig Heffernan and I am going to describe a tool called the Employing Game that I developed to help employers understand the journey required to become an employer of choice. So I've taken the old childhood favourite of snakes and ladders and I'm using this as a visual representation of the journey to become an employer of choice. And so the snakes are representing the things that you shouldn't do, the don'ts, and the ladders represent the do's. What I would say about the game that I've developed is that it is a loaded board. So really, employment isn't about leaving it to chance. So when you're employing somebody, you really should be putting thought and effort. You should be loading the game to give you the best opportunity to be a good employer and for your employees to have a great experience in your business. Whether the employees stay with you or not, it's important that you manage the experience that they do have so that when they go beyond your business's gate, they're singing your praises or they're at least not saying bad things about you. So it is important to think about what you can do to not leave it to chance. So this is a loaded board and actually stack it in your favour to make to build your reputation and your brand as a good employer. Also, this board represents a sequential journey. So when we think about a board game, you start at the bottom and you work your way up to the top to win the game. And that's the same with employing people. It's a sequential journey. And many of the things that you do in the previous stage are setting you up to be successful at the next stage. So the board game represents that journey, both sequentially and in terms of loading it. Get your ladders right, and then you're going to avoid your snakes. So when we look at the first section, which is the bottom section of the board, this is about before employing, or what we call employment basics. This is a very, very controllable concept. You can put all of these things in place. I would come across many good employers in terms of being decent people, but they've let themselves down badly by not having the basics in place. So really controlling the controllables, get as much work done in your business prior to employing, and that's going to help you to succeed in the next level. When we look at this board game, when you fail further further up the board, it's going to bring you back to a position on the board that had you done that better, you probably would have prevented yourself failing further on. So the kind of ladders that we see are business awareness, so being very clear about what your business needs in terms of the employee that you're hiring. A successful recruitment drive, so we think of a recruitment, people think in everyday terms that a recruitment drive is having loads of people apply for your job. But actually, a successful recruitment drive might mean that you have one or two people, but they're really perfect for the job. And that means that you have very well defined what you're looking for. It may be that you decide that you have time and space in your business to train that employee. That opens up your pool of candidates to a much larger number because you're willing to train them in the skill set. We often hear people talking about hiring for attitude rather than skill set, because when you hire somebody with a good attitude, you can teach them what they need to know in your business. Being compliant, so having all your health and safety in place, making sure you've got your insurance, your contracts, all of those things that are totally controllable in advance. You really shouldn't leave that to chance. You shouldn't say, well, I'll find somebody and then worry about that later. Get that in place. When we start looking at things like writing a really good contract, it actually clarifies to us what's required in the business. And it may be that you find that you can say to yourself, actually, I don't need a full-time employee. I need 2 part-times, I'm creating options for myself by clearly understanding what it is I need. And everything in place. I would say that businesses that have everything in place probably already have employees and have a good track record of having employees. And so their system is already well set up to bring more employees into their business. But it is something you should strive towards anytime you're taking in an employee, to make sure that everything is in place. And you'll get more familiar with that as you go on this journey. You'll understand what works and what doesn't work, what works for you, what you could do better, and maybe you invest in something that you didn't actually need at all and it didn't add any value. So as you move through the journey and as you take on more employees, you're more likely to have everything in place. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't have the ambition to have that with your first employee. Then the snakes are no contracts prepared, so just really grabbing somebody and saying, come and work for me, but not really thinking about what it is you require for them, not thinking about the rules and regulations or the rules of engagement. If you think of it as a game, you're not actually thinking about what's required of the staff. Last minute hiring is just an absolute no-no, because when we go for last minute hiring, Unless you're an employer of choice, last minute hiring means that you will take what you're given rather than get what you want. Now, if you're an employer of choice and you find yourself in a situation where you need an employee pretty quickly, well, because of your reputation, you'll probably have a good pool of people that you can draw on who will actually fit your system, but that is the reward of working hard towards becoming the employer of choice. So last minute hiring really needs to be avoided. You could work that into something with like your discounted planner. You would think about where's a good place to bring in my employee so that I have them trained and ready for those pressure points in the business year. And none are poor staff facilities. Well, if an employee comes to you and goes somewhere else and they've got better staff facilities, that is something that they will make their mind up on there and then. You'd have to have a lot of great personality and lots of other things going for you for people to pick your setup over somebody else's if you have poor or no staff facilities. Then when we look at the next section, which is about that initial employment or fulfilling role expectations, really that you've successfully found somebody, you're bringing them into your business, the kind of things that you should be really thinking about to make sure their first impression is very positive. As humans, we are wired to be to give a lot of weight and a lot of importance to our first impression. So it's really important that you think about that when you're bringing somebody into your business. And the kind of ladders that we could climb to make that successful would be clear induction process. So really knowing how you're going to go about the process, who's that person going to, maybe they're going to shadow somebody, how they're going to be integrated into the team. Role clarity is essential. The leading cause of job dissatisfaction is a lack of role clarity. So making sure that you know exactly what that person is supposed to do and that you're communicating that effectively. Planning rosters, task lists, really that goes hand in hand with creating your contracts in the before employment stage. So there should be a huge amount of information available to you to make that very easy. That planning rosters, task list, that creates the role clarity required. So it's not just saying that I need somebody for milking, but it's actually telling them when they're milking, how long it's going to take, what's required on that. So you're working those two things together. And then protected break times. Allowing people the time, allowing people their holidays if that's what's been offered, allowing people break times during the day so that they can rejuvenate themselves in terms of energy levels. It's very common, I would hear in many employers saying, "Oh, I'll just catch them in their lunch break because I know where they are." Well, actually, that's not a lunch break then, that's not a coffee break then, because you're still talking to them about work. So allow your staff the opportunity to unwind and a bit of downtime. Very important for yourself as well, of course, as the employer. And then we've got snakes. So the snakes are reneging on time off. So promising time off and then saying next day, actually, I can't afford for you to go tomorrow because XYZ is happening on the farm and I need you to be there because you have XYZ skill. That's a really dangerous game to play, and it doesn't take long for people to get fed up of that very, very quickly. If you offer time off, you must honour it, no matter how painful it is to you or your business. The way you prevent it from being painful is by planning well in advance so you know who's available at any one time in the year. And that's, again, you could use something like the discounted planner to match farm events against availability. No accountability for poor performance. One of the most common things I'm asked to discuss is accountability, so holding people accountable. It is critical that you have your standards in place if you want to hold people accountable. If you don't know what your standards are, it's very difficult to have that conversation because you feel a bit like a bully, you feel like you're not being fair, even though you know it's wrong what they're doing. So having very clear standards in place gives you something to measure up against, and it's objective. So when an employee does something they shouldn't do, of course, first of all, you would ask yourself, what is it about me that created that behaviour? But if you believe everything is in place for them to do their job properly and they choose not to, and they are aware of what your standards are, well, then you're in a position to hold them accountable for that poor performance. Moody or inconsistent behaviour, well, that comes back actually to role clarity. So people need to know where they stand with you. And a lot of research shows that people respond well to leadership that is strict but fair. And fairness there would be consistent. You're consistently behaving in the same way. Better to have a tyrant all the time than to have somebody I can't guess where they are, who's coming in the gate today, which boss do I have? That's very difficult for people to work with because it removes role clarity. And not paying on time is, of course, another huge issue. If you're going to, people, no matter how well you get on with somebody, if you're not reimbursing them for the transaction of work to pay, well, then they're not going to be very impressed and they'll walk away quite quickly. Luckily, in Australia, you have good employment law that makes those kind of issues, those kind of snakes, more difficult to to do. Okay, so then we're looking at ongoing employment and continuous working relationships. So this now we have got somebody in place. It's not now saying, well, I've got them in, we've done our induction, that's it, I don't have to think about them anymore. It's an ongoing relationship, because if we look at the things like the ladders, there's things there supporting changing motivations. So people change as they're in your business for whatever reason. Maybe there's things going on at home. Maybe they've developed their skill set, and so they've become a better employee and want to progress in terms of your business versus where they came into the point they came into your business at. Essentials only in stress period, for example, you are looking after your staff, you're acknowledging the pressures across the year and making it as easy as possible for your staff to perform properly. Performance reviews is an interesting one. Performance reviews should happen regularly. It shouldn't be I'll decide what to say to you at the end of the year. That's for an anonymous system where there's so many employees in the business that senior management don't really know the other levels of the organisation. But in a farming business, regardless of the money that you're making, from an employee point of view, farm businesses are small to medium. So you have the opportunity to constantly review with your staff. It could be that morning meeting where you say, what went well yesterday, what could go better, what's coming up. So you are engaging continuously with your staff, and that performance review should be just a normal part of every day, just like it is when you see your animals walking past. You're kind of assessing how are they looking today, etc. It's the same thing with your staff. And progression opportunities. Don't get caught up in the kind of hierarchical notion that progression means people have to move up. It could be that progression could be an acquisition of skills. So there's lateral progression as well, where you're giving people more skill sets, even if you can't give them more accountability in terms of your business. So what skills can you offer? Are you continuously investing in your staff? And that might be actually just engaging with them more. It might be asking for their opinion more, asking them to contribute to farm meetings. It doesn't have to be about changing their position within the organisation. And then the snakes, well, the giant snake is abusing employees' trust and goodwill. So, we could make a huge first impression. People could love working for you, but you just start taking them for granted, or you assume something about them, or maybe you just get a little bit difficult with them, or you're not communicating with them, or you become a bit disrespectful of them. Or their scenario changes and you're not respecting the changes in their scenario. So maybe they have family now and they want to be left home early, and you're kind of putting, not even early, but left home on time, and you're actually putting pressure on them to stay on. Well, that's abusing their trust and their goodwill. So that's a very large and quick snake to slide down. And that puts you back in a position probably of last minute hiring, because that person will leave. Communication breakdown. This is a really common one, where people who have got on very well in the past, maybe a unit manager and an employer, they just get at loggerheads because they have a differing opinion about how something should be handled. And it gets to a point where they can't speak to each other properly anymore. And that can be very, very frustrating for both parties, particularly if previously there had been a strong relationship in terms of communication. That often requires external intervention. And that may be just another employee from the business, so external to that relationship, or it could be bringing in a consultant to mediate that conversation. And inconsistent finishing times, well, they are an absolute killer, because that removes role clarity. And it can be, as I mentioned, for the abusing employees' trust and goodwill, it could be that somebody, having had no previous ties outside of your business, were able to work any hour that you asked of them, and then their motivations change, and so they need to be home more consistently, or they need to be away more consistently at a particular time, and maybe you're not allowing that to happen. So the employing game, a visual progression of the becoming an employer of choice concept. Conclusions, it shouldn't be a game of chance. You should really stack your odds to be a good employer. Put as much as possible in place to control the outcome. So you're really putting work in at each level. You're not leaving it to chance, as the original game would have done. And also, the game is ongoing. So we're constantly bringing new people in. Situations change, regulation changes. All of these things are changing, so it's ongoing. It's not a static concept. Yay, I've got an employee in now. I don't have to make any more effort on this game. I need to, I'm happy. Things are great. Because, people do leave, and also people's motivations within the business change, and you need to respond to that. The more you are reviewing and thinking about this, the easier it will become. You've got to engage with it just like you do every other aspect of your business in order for your business to be a thriving enterprise. So the employing game, a visual representation of how to achieve that employer of choice status, load the game, climb those ladders, avoid those snakes, and give yourself every opportunity to have a great reputation as an employer and as a result, a strong and robust business. Thank you very much. And as a result, a strong and robust business. Thank you very much.